Welcome to X-Men Evolution, episode 9 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm JC, and despite the fact that Rod isn't sleeping, I almost just zonked out in the middle of that intro, so we're already on a great pace tonight.
I'm Rod, and I'm all messed up because yesterday I decided to get up before the sunrise to go jogging, voluntarily and organically. I haven't recovered yet because I'm in my 40s.
Do you think it's because we dealt with the hurricane in LA, our bodies are just completely thrown off, which also was barely a hurricane?
Yeah, well, it actually partially was because I've had joint problems since I was a teenager, so I could feel the air pressure change. Even though the hurricane wasn't a hurricane by the time it hit us, just the air pressure that came with it, I was like, oh no, I know this is going to be a bad 2 or 3 days. But then on top of that, add the physical exertion of waking up early and jogging.
and to showcase how bad a hurricane it was for us, we literally had mutual friends who were at Universal Studios during the downpour. So super dangerous event.
Was that Nathan and Anna?
And another one too.
Okay.
We had multiple mutuals who were there.
Yeah, it was funny. It was spotty. I think that's more south than LA and SoCal got some worse stuff hitting. Dodger Stadium got flooded. I don't know if there's any major damage from that and stuff, but as far as I know, no injuries or anything like that. So I think Angelonians are scared enough of regular rain. So when you add natural disaster rain, it's all right, take this seriously.
Well, here's how you know it was LA preparing for a hurricane. Because when you actually went to any store to see what supplies were left, all the produce was gone, but the canned goods were still on the shelf.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, even though some stuff was kind of a little bit bare, it wasn't as crazy as it has been in the past. And also just the people weren't insane.
Yeah.
I went in and it was a little bit crowded, but it wasn't the first lockdown or something. Where it was,
people were literally doing hurricane parties and just drinking until it started. So, yeah.
I know that's the thing, on the East Coast in Florida, it was a hurricane party. So Angelonians were probably finally, it's been a century before
we finally get our hurricane party.
Anyway, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single animated X-Men episode. That still turned out right. We can find... along with some bonus episodes. Our first series started with the original 1992 X-Men the animated series, building up to the release of X-Men 97, which we thought was coming to Disney Plus in 2023, considering it's pretty much September now. Oh, actually, by the time you hear this, will be September, right?
It will be by the time this is posted.
Okay.
Yep.
Since it's September now, not looking good.
Every toy is coming out. To date the show. Obviously, aside from the hurricane, they showed the next set of Lego minifigures for Marvel, and there are 3 X-Men 97 minifigures in that set.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and everything else in the set has come out.
I think that's a sign, usually when toys do that it was supposed to come out by now, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's why we got so much of it at San Diego Comic-Con this year.
So there's a big boost there, whether it's has something to do with the strikes or some kind of a kink in the works of.
Well, I don't think it's the strike because we've talked about, the guilds is a separate one for animation. So
yeah, well, I just mean as far as a domino effect of just the city in general, because it all ends up feeding into a entertainment pipeline for whoever, the studios and stuff. So you never know how it messes up the programming and stuff. Well, we better save this until we run out of stuff or something.
If they didn't worry about how Secret Invasion messed up their programming, I don't think they would worry about this. But
that's still so disappointing. Like I said, I always go into, especially these Marvel shows, I liked all of them except for Iron Fist. And then this one, it was I can't even defend this ending. There's even parts of the actual Secret Invasion series that I could have been fine with, but I don't know.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that started over 20 years ago. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode on wherever you want, and then come back. We are currently not sponsored or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way.
Speaking of spoilers, if you haven't looked at the TikTok comments in a while, don't. I glanced at them today on our latest post, and there's a bunch of spoilers.
What is the post that went live? It's the Powers one?
Yeah, so some people in there, I'm gonna assume the best out of people, and that they didn't the first comments didn't know that we haven't already watched the show. So you should know this because of, and then they spilled a bunch of beans of the finale of the season. And
good.
And someone else who, I'm sorry, I forgot your username, but I'm assuming that you listen to the show, so thank you. Because you had pointed out to them, they're watching it weekly, so they haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh. So now I'm scared to go in and check the comments to defend ourselves, but thankfully we have a viewer who hopefully is. So
Yeah. And I'm probably not going to look for a little while. I'll post, but I won't look at the comments for a little bit, because we're so close. We're a couple of, like, the next recording session will probably be the finale.
Right.
And so I'll probably have forgotten by then. So hopefully I'm just gonna
Perfect.
Anyway, don't forget to follow us. Speaking of, don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services.
Now, on to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 9, titled Survival of the Fittest. It aired on March 3rd of 2001, currently sits at a 7.4 star rating on IMDb. Before we even get into the episode, Rod, were you just completely misled by the title the same way I was?
Survival of the Fittest.
Instantly, sure. I went to Apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. Maybe either that or like Sinister or something. Something have to do with like evolution.
Right. I was 100% not expecting what we got in this episode.
I mean, yeah, there's a couple things. I'll get into it when we get to those parts. But there's a couple things that I was like, maybe it's my preconceived notions from the 92 series. I was like, oh, this is going to be. Then it wasn't.
Right. So, cold open starts off with Stokes County Maximum Security Facility. That didn't seem like a county jail to me.
Right. Yeah. And also, is Stokes a reference to something? It seemed like really specific, or did they just pick it? They just picked it.
There were things that I did look up, and there was not a lot of information about the episode in general. Stokes was not one of the things I looked up, unfortunately.
They didn't have a Larry Houston on the show to throw in random Easter eggs.
No, I don't think so. Starts off with an officer arriving, going through like a bunch of different sealed doors and security things. And honestly, it gave me a little bit of a vibe of the first X-Men movie with like that weird, obviously it was the Cerebro door in that movie, but it was like, it felt like a little bit of a nod to that, at least to me.
Well, it's funny you say that because it was two things to me. Like at the beginning, or a couple things. At the beginning, when he put the one key in, I was like, that's not very maximum security. But then it kept happening. And so what it actually reminded me of at the beginning was Get Smart. You know, when they
okay,
to the quarter. I don't. I'm assuming the audience that listens to this podcast is old enough to know that show. I'm not so sure about anybody younger.
Actually, when we were doing X-Men 92, it was that 35 plus age range, and then as soon as we started doing Evolution, analytics started showing we started getting younger listeners to it. Nice. So they might not actually know what Get Smart is.
There's a remake with Steve Carell that's kind of funny, I guess.
Was that the one that The Rock was in?
Maybe I've forgotten who was in that movie. Maybe, yeah. That might have been.
I feel like The Rock was.
And then there was a spin-off with like two of the side characters. Anyway, the remake in the 2000s, Get Smart, might sit better with you. But then the guard got into the main section. It reminded me of the X-Men movies, like you mentioned. And so my note was like, oh, this must be Magneto.
Yeah, I didn't think it was Magneto because obviously we've seen him. But it gave me all the vibes of Magneto in the maximum security room where it was like, literally there's a bridge that you have to cross to get to him and everything like that.
I think the bridge especially was the thing. I was like, well, there's a lot of metal here, but also we don't know what's inside this thing that they have in the middle.
Yeah, and it was kind of like a rotating restaurant style room that like you had to like walk into the door at the right time and stuff like that. It was like, okay, that's pretty secure. And then of course the cop reveals that it was Kane Marco in the holding facility, which again, just from the name alone, I was predisposed to it being Apocalypse, and all of a sudden when it was the Juggernaut, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with like what we know of X-Men before. It was just like, oh, strong dude, survival of the fittest.
Right. But that's when we actually get the Mystique reveal as the cop. And it was basically like, oh, yeah, you're long overdue for a family reunion. And we cut to the intro credits.
So I guess that clarifies a little bit for us with Mystique, is that she's able to get down to like fingerprints and stuff because she did all those biometric scans and things. Yeah,
it was able to get fingerprint and the iris of the eye because like that's...
Yeah. That's
an absurd level of detail. Comes back and we see that all the X-Kids and the Brotherhood are camping in the mountains, it looks like. And there's just like, an arbitrary group of other students that are there with them, of course. And I thought this was like summer camp vibes. And then they just kind of like start going through all these camping stereotypes. You're not gonna, paddle canoes. You're not gonna do this. You're not gonna do that. And it had the kid version of Full Metal Jacket to me.
Yeah, my note here is like the kids are on the most dangerous field trip or camp trip ever.
Right.
The things he was describing they were going to do.
Yeah. We get the character introduced whose name is Sergeant Hawk. And I couldn't find anything about a Sergeant Hawk online when I was searching for it. I guess it can't even be a G.I. Joe reference because Hawk in G.I. Joe was a general, so...
Yeah, I guess it was just like a 90s. Like, that sounds like a drill sergeant name.
Yeah, and you find out they're at a spot called Ironback Survival Camp,
Everything just real on the nose.
It just sounds like pure hell.
Right, but also there's literal children there. I don't know if it gets more clear throughout the episode, but I think I was just like in my head trying to rationalize, like, they were sent on this trip specifically because they're X-Men, right, and not kids at the school.
I didn't get that. I think it was a school trip because there was a group of kids that were there with them. And you also had the Brotherhood kids who were all there. Yeah. So it's like, I guess it's just like every aggressive team building thing that you could do at this high school, they're automatically enrolled for. And yeah, and there was a mention that it was like, you know, they could have done survival training back at the Institute, but it would have been Wolverine taking it, and everybody opted to come to the survival camp instead. So
I get that. If you're going to a normal high school and you have like a man who's basically immortal with like metal claws and a skeleton and stuff, who's also kind of like a hard ass.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll take my chances with the human.
Right. Yeah. The baseline human.
Yeah.
So Hawk keeps going and he purposely says Scott's name wrong. He calls him Sumners instead of Summers. And then points out that Scott is going to be in charge of like the whole group, which also I guess includes the Brotherhood and the baseline humans that are there with them because of academic achievement. And obviously, you know, the Brotherhood kids are not a fan of that. And then we get where I would be, which is Kurt, Kitty, and Spike all complaining about being on this trip.
Yeah, Spike was specifically like, I'm a city kid. What am I doing here?
And Rogue is literally like, okay, cool. I want to just hotwire a bus and get out of here. That is where Cyclops interjects and lets them know that it was either this or the other option was Wolverine. And it actually reminded me of the Spike introduction episode where they're like, there's always a choice. And I'm like, that's not a great choice. This group does not give great choices. They give things that are like illusions of choice.
I also wonder what the options for the other kids were, like the random group and the Brotherhood, or if they were just going to go on this trip.
I think they were going to go on the trip.
Okay.
Well, my favorite part though is like after the first initial scene, we never see any of those other fucking kids again either.
I was going to make a note. Yeah, note of that. There's like one more time I think we kind of maybe see them or like allusion to them. And then I'm like, what's going on here? There's
only 2 teams in the trip now. The next note I have is Blob wants to murder.
Yeah.
Because Blob is jealous that Cyclops gets to be the leader because of academic achievement. And I'm pretty sure somebody is like, you can't even spell that.
I think it was Avalanche. Yeah. Or no, is it Quicksilver or Avalanche? It was like, you can't even
It was Quicksilver. Okay. Because Avalanche actually is like, oh no, we don't have to like murder them. We just want to embarrass them. And I'm like, I feel like Mystique would not be okay with that method.
Right.
Pops back over and Mystique says that it is cellular paralysis biofluid, which is just a great MacGuffin for why the Juggernaut can't move.
Mm-hmm. Also seems, I mean, I know it's like, you know, supervillains and all that stuff. It also seems very inhumane.
Oh, it's horribly inhumane.
Because it implies that he's conscious, right?
Yeah.
He can't move.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it knocked him out. It's just like, cool, you're in a constant state of not being able to move.
And even if you are knocked out, it doesn't seem like there'd be any plan to get him out or do something to like neutralize him and stuff. And not that I'm for like capital punishment, but like at that point, why not just
right? Like this feels like it goes against the Geneva Conventions.
Right. And also at a great cost to whatever that maximum security prison area is.
You know what, man? To go super dark, maybe they just can't figure out a way to kill him.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Yeah, because Mystique makes the point of saying, well, they stopped the unstoppable. He starts to like regain his consciousness. It reveals that he doesn't even know who she is. And she refers to herself as a deal maker. And then they did the thing that is every bad, like, setup from escape films and stuff like that, all the way to like Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, where his helmet is there, like in the cell with him.
Yeah.
It's like, wouldn't you want to put that literally as far away from him as possible?
Or that would be something you could destroy, right? Unless it's mystical. I don't think it's ever mystical in his stories.
No, it is. I can tell, because when Colossus got the Juggernaut abilities in the comics, he also got the helmet with him.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So I think that's associated to the Sidorak stuff.
Gotcha.
And because of X-Men 92, I know how to actually say that character name. And then she basically is saying, oh, yeah, well, you know, I'm going to release you in exchange for just giving me one item of Professor X's. And he just like pushes past her. And she's like, well, I was going to put you on the jet. And he's like, no, I don't need a jet. Nobody takes the Juggernaut anywhere.
To me, that sounded like he rejected the deal.
It did.
Until later when they were together again. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was weird. It was just kind of like, I guess it was, I don't need you to get where I'm going. And then he just proceeds to just go through the wall.
Right. And no other security or alarms or anything like that.
I think this is where we have to imagine it was like the standards and practices. Oh, you can't have this guy just murdering cops on the way out of this jail. Pop back over to survival camp. We see them on the ropes course, which is the last time we see any of these other students. And, you know, Scott and one of the others are climbing up. Blob tries to climb up and just literally pulls all the rope down and everything like that.
It looks like it would have broken that.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Blob, even if he didn't have his mutant powers of being as dense as he is, I don't think he's climbing that regardless.
Right.
Like, the structure itself is not going to be able to support him.
Yeah, I think it was Avalanche Elves with Cyclops because the two of them were kind of accelerating at everything.
Yeah, they keep going back and forth. And then they get to the bottom and they basically did the rope, whatever.
The zip line.
Oh, the zip line. Yeah. They get to the bottom and they start, you know, untying their boats and Lance just kicks him into the water. Spike wants to respond by shanking Lance effectively. And Jean is like, no, we agreed. This is a no powers trip. And then immediately Cyclops shoots Lance's boat.
That's pretty comedic. But also, Spike wanted to unalive someone at that moment.
Dude, a lot of people want to kill him on this show. Let's be real.
He wouldn't have been successful, as we learned from last episode. He's not as hard as you think he is. But possibly more ways than we think. A lot of double entendres last episode.
So Cyclops gets over and crosses a finish line first. They basically start like pairing off a little bit. It's like a little bit of that like gang fight setup. Rogue again throws out the word freak. And then we cut to them doing push-ups. And
as punishment, yeah.
And Blob, to his credit, does 60 push-ups. I can't do 60 push-ups right now, I'm pretty sure.
To me, not just that scene, but just this whole episode was kind of reinforcing, like, he does have some, like, mutant strength or something.
Yeah.
But also, I think the unbelievable part for me was that Kitty or Spike, if they were, like, playing by big city kids, they were just doing push-ups like that. And I think this is where the kids disappear, the other ones.
Yeah, we just stopped seeing the other kids.
Because my note before that was, Jean says for no one to use their powers, Cyclops immediately uses powers, and none of the normies notice. But then it didn't matter.
Yep, it didn't matter one bit.
They all got killed by the blast.
Yeah. So, you know, you get more tension between the teams. Hawk is basically over and he's like, all right, you're going to go up and whichever team gets to the flag first. And Quicksilver and Nightcrawler just start arguing with each other about who's going to get there first. And I'm like, are they just going to like reveal their powers in front of this guy right now? And then he's like, no, it has to be the whole team.
Yeah. And also, it was called Mount Humiliation.
Yes.
I really love that part.
Mount Humiliation. Yeah, this is like, it's not scared straight, but it's like, we're going to break all of you. Like, it was definitely a fucking boot camp.
I kind of wonder, too, if when they wrote it, they meant, like, the drill sergeant to say Mount Humiliation in, like, a sarcastic kind of way, you know? But then the actor that read it was, like, just read it straight, because it was definitely delivered straight, like, that was the actual name of the mountain. From
seeing, like, boot camp places on, like, reality TV and stuff like that, I could actually see them unironically calling it that.
That's funny.
So Scott and Lance just kind of, like, get in each other's faces. Scott, like, goes to grab his glasses like he's gonna shoot Lance at like point blank. Right. And Jean steps in. Scott is, you know, frustrated. He's like, why are we the ones who always have to play by the rules? This is bullshit. And Lance is like, fine, we'll do it straight. No powers for anybody. Jean is just like really annoyed. Like, there's no other way to say it. She's just like, she wants everybody to just get through this and be cool, and is so happy that everybody agreed to use no powers. And she's like proud of herself, and then immediately just no.
Yeah. This is not going to happen. None of these people are going to follow these rules.
Jumps back to the mansion. You got Wolverine and Professor X there. Wolverine is disappointed that he couldn't be the one training the kids. And Xavier just point blank says, no, they chose. They did not want you to be the one to do this.
He's trying to make it very clear there's rub salt in the wound.
And at that point, Cerebro detects a mutant. We get the mention that it is Xavier's half-brother. So that is actually one of the only bits of trivia there. One, in the comics, he is a stepbrother and not a mutant.
Oh, yeah, because they said it was like an enhanced mutation or something.
Yeah, it was like, well, what does enhanced mutant mean? Because that's what Cerebro says. Xavier explains it was an X gene at birth, but he enhanced it via mysticism.
It's so scary.
I mean, dude, the stuff that happened from the 90s to now with the X-Men of inflation of their powers via like technology or magic and stuff like that, they're all walking atomic bombs at this point.
It's kind of like if Doctor Strange was a mutant to begin with and then went to Camouflage. That'd be wild.
That'd be great. They see Juggernaut is approaching and there's like cop cars that are in the way and he just walks through nonchalantly and just flips them.
This whole montage of him making his way to the mansion that's all the murders that we were talking about they left out of the prison scene.
And also one of them is he just walks through a train.
And
like
it's
like
derails and everything.
Yeah, just derails, kills all the vagrants who are on it and everything, you know. So hops back over. Scott is leading the X team through the forest. Spike reminds us again that he is a city guy and is really bothered by mosquitoes, which I think of anybody, he actually has the natural defense for this. Use your powers to stop the mosquitoes. You don't have to use your powers to get an advantage, but I don't think Jean would have been pissed at that.
Also, like, I guess, maybe this is me assuming a lot, but I guess I had assumed since Spike had all his bony spikes and stuff, that maybe the skin was harder, but I don't know. That was just like a dumb, like, I was like, oh, he's getting mosquito bites. That's interesting, you know? Mosquitoes be scared of, like, that everything that was going on with him.
I mean, I guess it's under his skin until it pops out, which makes it Wolverine levels of like gross. And also he must have no pain receptors,
right? Yeah,
because otherwise that means his skin is literally being ripped apart constantly.
Yeah, between that and his clothes, like, that sounds like an awful life.
We see that the Brotherhood has decided in a more direct route where Toad is like hopping up like kind of like a mountain goat, and Blob is just pulling up Quicksilver and Lance.
And those two are not being nice to him about it. Like, if he slips, we're screwed. Like, dude, I know he's a big guy, but you don't have to keep pointing it out. Like,
but also they're not wrong. You definitely will die if that's the case.
And then that was another piece of evidence that he was like kind of mutant strong.
Right. Well, I mean, aside from what he did to the trucks in his debut episode too.
Yeah. He's able to like just like he scaled that mountain. He didn't look like he was straining, and he was carrying two people around his waist, or a rope around his waist. Yeah,
so he's carrying his own weight, which we know is a ton, maybe literally, and carrying Lance and Quicksilver. I mean, I guess carrying Quicksilver probably isn't that hard, but Lance is a full-grown, like, you know, jock kid, so.
Yeah.
Jumping back over to Westchester, Storm is in the jet, and I was like, wait, what is she doing? Where she hops into this little stand after she puts the jet on autopilot and then is flying around Westchester and just encompasses the jet in fog as well as the entire area. And then the news is like, yeah, they're searching for the escaped convict. We can't find them because of this fog. So it's like, I guess it's still mutants are just not as regularly talked about at this point. Like,
oh, that's true. Yeah.
Like, because wouldn't you assume if there was like, you know, the super powered criminal making his way to the city and then there's like a weird fog, like none of that is ever like discussed.
Especially because there are people right now in our actual real world that believe in that stuff over science. Oh, it must be mutants and flat earth.
I love how you said it, saying it like an old man. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, the stand was kind of cool because it was like they, you know, it's one of those customizations for the X-Men. I'm sure there's other like customizations of the Blackbird. And also it was another one of those, the autopilot stuff. It just keeps reminding me whenever this autopilot stuff happens in these cartoon shows of how much that ruined my conception of autopilot when I was a kid. Because later on in life I ended up taking a few piloting lessons, and I didn't like make myself sound dumb by saying it out loud, but as they were explaining autopilot to me, I was like in my head, like, don't say anything because it's probably wrong. And like autopilot's not what you think it is in the real place. It doesn't fly like a multi-million-dollar Blackbird jet alone.
Yeah, the conception you have as a kid of what autopilot actually does versus, you know, what it does in shows is just so different.
Yeah, and in some shows, it full on like battles on autopilot, you know?
I mean, they have the advanced AI autopilot, let's be real.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, and then you get the news report. They mention Hillary Taylor. That's not a reference I could find to anything.
Okay. Yeah, I stopped writing down random names because I'm so wrong about them.
I mean, at this point, I'll just handle the random name references, Rod, because I'll at least have like that sounds kind of familiar. You know, but no, the Hillary Taylor. I guarantee this writing team just had fun putting in like family members or like people they went to like writing school with or something like that.
Yeah. And this whole situation was probably one of the few times we saw Xavier be a little like empathetic or compassionate to the general public.
Yeah.
And like he was like, oh, if they won't try to capture him if they can't find him, like, oh, this was for everyone else's protection, not to distract Juggernaut.
Do not go into the giant cone of fog because the thing in there will kill you. We've had a movie about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So their plan is essentially that Wolverine is going to intercept, and if he is not successful, then Xavier is going to go into the danger room and have the defenses of the danger room take him down. And that's where we get the exposition dump that, you know, the only thing that Xavier can do is hit him with psychic blasts, but the helmet needs to come off.
I love it. He's like, as long as he doesn't have his helmet. You're like,
well, maybe you shouldn't have fucking stored him with it in the jail.
Right. But also Xavier's got plenty of practice with those psychic blasts because he's been doing them all season.
Yep. Back over to the mountain, the Brotherhood kids find the abandoned mine and they're like, oh, cool, shortcut. And it has all the very stereotypical like danger, keep out signs. And the bad kids aren't going to listen to that. They're going to go right in there.
I love it. Toad's like, oh yeah, there's like a staircase that goes straight up to the top. And no one questioned it. Like, yep, that sounds right. This dangerous mine entrance. I get it though. Yeah, like you said, it's the bad kids who are like, we don't follow the rules.
Also, they're not the smartest.
Yeah.
Like I genuinely think if you had to like rank them, Quicksilver's probably the only one who's actually smart.
I can kind of see that.
Like he's a cocky asshole, but he's probably the smartest of the group.
Also, you know, paralleling the real world and, you know, not to reference events of the last few years, typically the people who don't understand, like, you know, you can't tell me what to do versus like things that are meant to protect you aren't the greatest people, upstanding people.
Keep out is a suggestion. It is not a rule.
Right.
No.
It's like, that's for you. Not for the tunnel. So
as the bad kids are cheating, Cyclops decides he wants to cheat. So he says to Kurt that he wants him to just, you know, jump up there and check the flag. Kurt is like, yeah, Jean's going to be pretty pissed if we do that. And Cyclops kind of like relents a little bit. He's like, all right, fine. We'll just skip the pylons and I'm going to have Spike just like hook a rope up higher. And Spike's like, yeah, sure. Fuck it. Let's go. And then as soon as he does it, Jean is there watching and like everybody has that like, wah wah look of disappointment.
What Nightcrawler did do though is he did go out and scout to make sure it was they were in the right direction.
Yeah.
But even that was like a little bit of, I guess I don't understand what that little bit of detail was for.
Yeah.
Because it didn't do anything different. Like they were heading in the right direction. There's only one point of the mountain. They didn't show like a multi-peak, you know, like hill or something.
I mean, I guess it was make sure it's still there so we don't go all the way up to the top and we've already lost.
I guess, yeah.
But it was also just like get a picture with the flag, not bring the flag down. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole group afterwards is like staring at them like,
yeah.
It was maybe an hour ago that we said no powers.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten even like that late in the day still at this point. Hopping back into the cave, Lance is pissed at Toad because he's like, yeah, none of us are going to be able to fit up that.
Wasn't it kind of clogged or something?
Yeah, it was a little bit clogged, and like I think it was also like Blob couldn't fit up that being the major issue. And then I kind of regret saying that Quicksilver is probably the smartest of the bunch because he says, oh, well, Avalanche can use his powers to unclog the hole, which then, of course, leads to a cave-in.
They have gaps in their common sense.
Yeah. At that point, on the outside of the mountain, the X-Kids are getting pretty close, and then Spike, like, falls off the side of the mountain. In just, like, we get the classic cut to commercial break. Like, is he gonna die? No, he's not gonna die.
He's in the intro theme
for the
thing.
Yeah, we're not killing him in the first season if he's in the intro.
And you know, you're supposed to assume that that's the avalanche that was created or whatever.
Right. Yeah, they kind of did the whole like it doesn't happen concurrently, but you make the assumption that it is the same thing. Cut back from commercial, Jean gives a psychic catch, and Cyclops says, well, what's the difference between doing that versus us using our powers to get to the top? And this is the most our Cyclops ever.
Yeah, and also clear sign, like you said in X-Men '92, like those two were their, like Jean and Scott were like first relationships for each other.
Yeah,
this is very clear with Scott that he has never been in a relationship before.
Yeah,
with anyone. He's like, come on, man, what's the difference? And she just gives that like dagger stare.
At that point, Rogue spots the hole, and you hear Toad begging, and he's like, "You're not gonna like leave us down here, are you?" And Cyclops is like, "Fuck, I guess I'm not." Back over at the Institute, we get more of the backstory for Xavier and Kane, basically saying, his father had a problem with him that carried over to Kane, and that made him dangerous. And he basically gives the "I had no choice," which, again, there's lots of conversations in this show about choice, and then because he taught Scott there's always a choice, and he's like, I had no choice. I had to put him into a coma, a medical induced coma, essentially.
Yeah, actually, you bring up a good point. That makes you wonder if it's priming us for like an overarching like theme for the whole series. It's going to come down to like really big climaxes of choices. I mean, that's shows in general, but specifically this one. Yeah,
I feel like they're in a good way. They're hammering it in there of like there's the younger optimistic generation who's like there's always a choice, and it's like Xavier doesn't really give them a lot of choices, even in episode 7. Where, he's literally making decisions for them. He chose not to tell them about Mystique, and then they're questioning it, and he's like, oh, well, I'll just do better next time. Ha. It's like, the fuck?
I think it's next episode. We're going to see that theme come back around, so stay tuned for that.
Yep. So Juggernaut arrives at the Institute. Wolverine attacks, and, he just gets slammed through the entire Institute. I guess in this iteration, Wolverine has never faced Juggernaut before because he just gets thrashed.
Yeah, I was gonna say Wolverine has like a lot of confidence in himself to like take that, because we know Juggernaut, and like you said, apparently he doesn't.
Yeah,
we're like, why would you take him on alone?
But Wolverine as a character, I think in basically every version of him would still do that. I mean, obviously, because it's the cartoon version for Saturday mornings, we weren't seeing a violent, brutalized, bloodied Wolverine. But Wolverine and the Juggernaut has happened, and he gets fucked up a lot. Yeah. And also, he can stab him in the comics.
Yeah, so I was going to say, that series, How It Should Have Ended on YouTube?
Yeah, of course.
Picturing one of if they end up appearing in any of the movies, I'm just waiting for one of them to be like Wolverine does like the split claws where there's only two of them and just gets Juggernaut through the eye holes. He's like, done. End of movie.
I wonder if they've done that in the comics.
Oh, yeah.
John, when you're listening to this episode, when it airs, you know what to look for on Instagram for this week. But as they're going through stuff, he goes through and he breaks Cerebro by accident. I mean, I know the art style changes depending on the teams and stuff. This version of Cerebro looks cheap to me.
It was like a single, like not one computer, but like it was like a portion of a small wall instead of like the room that we usually know it as.
But even just the helmet felt cheap.
This was what, 1.0?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, that's a good point, because when they end up rebuilding it, maybe that's the Cerebro that becomes like the big, powerful one. Because Professor Xavier earlier in the episode did say like, oh, it's not scouting for mutants, it's just going on the kids. So I wonder if that was supposed to be like a limitation, like it doesn't have the bandwidth to do normal surveilance and
maybe
focus or something. Or, I don't know.
So the fight ends up leading into the danger room and just decimates the door. Mystique arrives and she just starts berating him. And Juggernaut just tosses her aside. Mystique has just gotten so much disrespect in this episode from the Juggernaut.
Yeah, that's where I was like, oh wait, they still had a deal going on? I thought he just like threw that away when he like walked out of the prison.
I mean, I think he did, and he was going just because he wants to kill Charles, has nothing to do with Mystique.
So she probably just didn't. She's the only one that didn't know.
It was a one-sided deal, and she was completely unaware that it was one side. And then there's a reference to it being like a welcome home for him, which, going back to the fact that it's his half-brother as opposed to the stepbrother and stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, this actually would be his home if it was the family home.
Oh, that's true. He probably grew up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, if it's half-brother versus stepbrother, because in the stepbrother scenario, it was like, the doctor who was not taking proper care of her, getting the fall in love, and then his kid was kind of like along for the ride. If it's like your half brother, it's like, oh no, there's actually a level of ownership that person feels to this location.
Yeah, and it pretty heavily implies that they probably spent like their latter years, like teen years or something together, right?
I mean, until whenever he went and started getting into mysticism, sure.
Right.
Hopping back to the mountain, Cyclops is rappelling down with the rope, helps up Lance. Scott's like, oh yeah, grab onto my back. I will pull you up. How strong is Scott? Because
Right. There were 2 ropes.
well, aside from that, yeah. Aside from the logistics of he could do it himself, but it's like, dude, that's super heavy. That's like a you tie the rope and have them pull you up scenario, right?
Yeah, that was the cockiness.
So they get up to the top. Blob spots the flag. Quicksilver runs over there. Nightcrawler teleports, and they end up getting there at the same time. And at that point, the Blackbird shows up, and Storm lets them know that both Xavier and Mystique are in trouble.
I really like this moment. It was really cool. Was it Nightcrawler was like, you in? And Bob was like, yeah.
Was it Nightcrawler and Blob, or was it?
No, sorry, not Blob. It was Quicksilver. It was the 2 that were on the flag.
I was gonna say I didn't think it was Blob. And then we get like, though this is the only way this works is it's because it's fucking teenagers. Is they do a flyby in the jet and they drop the flag with a Polaroid of them all by the flag together. To our points, though, these kids go from wanting to kill each other a few hours ago to being like, no, we're cool now.
Well, now
it's like the mood swing of teenagers is the only way that this works out.
Yeah, and they have 2 common enemies now, right? Whatever the threat to Mystique and Xavier are, and this drill sergeant. Because that was a big, like, fuck you to the drill sergeant, right?
Oh, it was 100% a fuck you to the drill sergeant.
Because they, like, javelin that flag down. Like, it could have impaled him on the way down, the way it came down. Yeah, and then the picture, it was like, oh, that's hilarious. This poor guy, like, I don't have a good grip on if he has an idea that these are superpowered kids or not. What would your reaction be if you thought they were normal teenagers, and then they did make it up to a mountain in like record time because it was still daylight out and everything, and then like a Blackbird jet flies by and
they disappeared because he never sees them again.
Yeah, not to mention the normal kids that we just never saw again.
Oh, they're dead.
Yeah, they drowned.
They died on the ropes course.
Yeah,
it's literally survival camp, and they failed.
Yeah. You did not survive.
Back to the danger room. Professor X is saying, this house is about new beginnings. Juggernaut's not having it. And then the most like defeated Xavier is like, you've learned nothing and you never will.
It's like, is he trying to talk him down?
Yep.
That wasn't gonna work.
At that point, he calls and activates Logan's Run X13, which...
I got that reference.
Yes. And it was like, X13, I was like, oh no, X23 is Laura, and Laura hasn't been invented yet, so it's not Laura. But yeah, the Logan's Run was like, okay. Like, and now I'm like, oh, I haven't watched that in so long. Right. Is X13 some sort of reference to that? But dude, no lie, all the wikis on these 2 episodes that we're recording tonight, basically empty. Literally the only thing that was consistent across all of them was in the comics, the Juggernaut is not a mutant at all. That is the only thing across all 4 of the different sites that I use for reference on this.
So this is the first time that we've heard that he's been partially mutant or whatever.
Right. Buzzsaws pop out and they just can't do anything to him. There's like a big swinging thing with maces on the side, and he just walks through all of them and makes sure to break every mace along the way.
The danger room not calibrated for the Juggernaut.
No, whatever that like deadly mode that Gambit used in X-Men 92 doesn't exist in this danger room apparently. Because he's if they're supposed to be using lethal force, it ain't doing shit. Mm-hmm. At that point, the kids arrive, and we have like kind of like combinations of people who are working together to take down the Juggernaut. Jean starts to pick him up, but there's a lot of strain on it. Blob just kind of straight up like bounces into him, and then he says, this is what happens when unstoppable meets unmovable, and then he immediately gets knocked on his ass. But Nightcrawler is able to teleport in there and get rid of one latch. Cyclops starts shooting him. It has no effect. Lance starts shaking the ground. Quicksilver is able to get in there, get one latch as well. So this tells me that this Quicksilver is nowhere near as fast as, the Days of Future Past Quicksilver.
Stopping time and listening to Eurythmics.
Exactly. Storm makes a mini tornado, which I don't know what Storm thought was going to happen, but that did nothing at all.
Right, she's still learning too.
Yeah. And then Rogue must have taken part of Kitty's powers because they simultaneously pop through a wall together and each take care of a latch.
That was a pretty badass team-up move. It's kind of showing us that the writers are paying attention to like the kids' power sets and stuff.
Yeah, and coming up with dynamics of how they work together. I think that's one of the things I had mentioned in X-Men 92, where they were in the modern Krakoan era, the New Mutants literally would talk about power synergies, meaning you'd have two people using their power at the same time, and the effects would be different based on the combination of it. And they would have like code names for whatever the combo move they were doing and stuff was.
Ooh, they're stealing that idea for the Mortal Kombat 1 game coming out with the cameo system.
Yes. To date the podcast, the previous Friday was at a shoot where they were going through all the different combo cameos and stuff like that. So.
Oh, did you have some of your creators go to one of the things to test out the beta or whatever?
No, I was at a creator's location as they were playing in a sponsored stream. So.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I was watching the NetherRealms live stream today where they were showing like how you can use them to fill in gaps of other players and stuff. I was like, ooh,
right,
interesting.
So then what I was not expecting is Toad used his tongue to take off the helmet.
That was the only time I rewound this episode. That was so gross because I just saw like, I don't know if I was watching the screen, but I guess I just didn't register what it was. It was just this green tether. And
nope, that's his tongue.
Yeah, I rewound it. I was like, oh,
yeah,
that was the worst part of this whole thing.
And I don't know. It's weird for me because the classic version of Toad, which was the Toad that I knew, was like the one who's like in a jester style outfit and stuff like that, and he was just like weird and gross. But this version of Toad, which is very reminiscent of what we would see in the X-Men movies, and then they started adjusting the comic book version to be more like this Toad. I was like, that is just fucking gross.
Right. I kind of would have liked to see a cutaway of him hitting himself in the head with the helmet when it came.
Oh back. Yeah, it's kind of like the elastic effect. Like you just pull it, and when it releases, it just. Yeah. So he being the Juggernaut continues to make his move towards Xavier, and he starts to slow down and effectively gets stopped right as he's at Xavier's knees.
Mm-hmm. Xavier's like, I'm sorry. He's like, are you though?
Yeah. They basically put down the Juggernaut. Then there's a great Mystique line, which was subtle, but obviously not too subtle, where it's like, well, there's something you won't see every day. And I was like, yep, that's good. It's like she realized like she couldn't keep going. Also, this is the first time they've seen Mystique since the big reveal, right?
Yeah, from this episode on, we start getting like Xavier and Mystique being a lot more friendly is not the completely right word, but they're more comfortable in each other's space than, I would have imagined from the beginning of this show.
Right.
More like how Magneto and Xavier were in the 92 series. Like, oh, there's like a respect dynamic or something, but early on in evolution, I just thought they were, they would be like polarized opposites where they would always be on separate sides of, physical spaces unless they had to fight. And they're just like kind of semi-comfortable in this. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it was weird.
Yeah, especially after she literally unleashed your half-brother to, even if it's like she didn't say, oh, I want you to kill him, it's like, well, she knew that's what he was going to do. Let's be real.
Yeah, she specifically told him at the beginning of the episode, she's like, because Kane was like, what about Charles? And she's like, well, I'll leave his fate up to you. Like,
yeah, you can do whatever you want. I don't really care.
So you're going to kill him.
Yeah. And then you get a moment of like respect between Lance and Scott, and it was like, you weren't half bad as a leader kind of scenario. I was like, okay, I was not expecting that, because that also gives a little bit of an implication that Lance is the leader of this group, at least from, outside of Magneto and Mystique. Like he's the field leader essentially.
Yeah, no, that's another thing they kind of established in this, especially with at the boot camp, how the two of them were accelerating.
Back at the jail, they put Kane into his immovability biotech or whatever the hell it's called.
Again, with no guards, just Xavier and the kids.
Yeah, they let civilians do this. Again, it's got to be him manipulating it. Like, I know it's like the easy answer, but he's definitely psychically manipulating everybody to let shit go. And then it's kind of like a pretty somber moment. It's like, well, you got to do what you got to do. Like that was kind of like the resolution of like why they just keep him imprisoned in this way.
It kind of goes back to your point of like maybe they do this to him because they can't kill him. Mm-hmm. So this is probably like their equivalent of a funeral for his brother.
Yeah, except he's now had to do it again.
Yeah, and they might have to keep doing it, so it's almost worse.
Right. Yeah, because he was able to psychically, we don't know for what the time frame is, of course, but was able to do like a little bit of a mind wipe on Sabretooth, and then because he didn't know how he got dropped in, the Arctic and stuff like that. It's like, okay, I guess maybe from the mysticism or something like that, or he's not able to do it to his brother either.
And then, of course, this is the appropriate time for Scott and Jean to flirt.
Yeah, where, he basically says, working with the other kids kind of felt right. And he points out that they're the ones who keep making lines in the sand. I don't know if that's 100% true, though, either,
Yeah, they've been pushing themselves. Especially
yeah.
this episode.
And then Jean, of course, makes the comment around, like, you can't control the will of others. Meanwhile, Charles is probably laughing in the background.
Yeah, she even said that with Charles present when they were putting Kane down.
Yeah.
And I was like, isn't that literally what he just did? Okay, sure. Nobody's bringing it up. Don't argue with a man that can wipe your mind.
Yeah, exactly. They already did, and he made them forget about it.
Right.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, hopefully they'll come around. It was okay. I don't know. There was something about it that I didn't love. The moment where it was like, oh yeah, they're not all bad, and it's like, I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the episode, Blob said he wanted to kill them. So
I have a feeling that was like a seed they were planning with us, where they're going to have the groups kind of merge in the later seasons or something.
Entirely possible. And now that's definitely going to end up in the TikTok comments to spoil the episode.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't love the episode. I thought it was fine. I don't know. Maybe it's just Juggernaut that doesn't do it for me.
He wasn't my favorite either. I mean, he's fine. My brother really loved Juggernaut. He had the action figures and stuff. I didn't dislike him. Whenever he appeared in anything, toys or shows or whatever, I was like, okay, it's cool.
Right.
But I didn't get super excited about him. I guess I just didn't ever get super excited about somebody who's just strong as like their only real thing. I know there's like magic and stuff around him, but like
no, but it's still the strength is the only thing that comes from it. Like he doesn't get other aspects of his character. He's just, the unstoppable object essentially. So
yeah, and then when you really broke it down, like not a whole lot happened in this episode. This is probably the least amount of notes I've taken so far in Evolution.
I could see that. But he also in the comics was just voted into being one of the members of the X-Men for the 4 seconds before everybody got killed.
Okay. He's like, I guess, spoiler for Quantumania if you haven't seen it yet. Kind of like MODOK being an Avenger.
I would say it is not the equivalent of Quantumania and MODOK being an Avenger.
At least I died an Avenger.
Yeah. No, he was legitimately voted by the Krakoan citizens at the Hellfire Gala to be an Avenger. Thank you, Rod. Great. And then Nimrod fell from the sky and immediately killed a bunch of people in like rapid succession.
That's kind of, just the way you described it, kind of hilarious.
I'll send you screenshots. Okay. Dazzler got it the worst.
Oh no. Taylor Swift.
They're all going to come back. We just don't know how.
Right, yeah, they can't die.
Well, no, they definitely can die right now. That's the thing, but yeah.
No, multiverse. Multiverse always saves them.
No. Jean's been resurrecting way before multiverses were a thing. Right. Come on.
Right. Well, I mean, for everybody else that doesn't have, like, the other MacGuffins.
Do you mean the group that's literally called The Five who could reincarnate any mutant?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Again, I love the fact that like I say stuff and you're like, is he serious? Like you're giving me the look on screen of like, are you fucking with me right now?
Right.
No, that's actually a thing.
Kind of like back in my other fandom, Mortal Kombat. There's the whole Revenants thing. So like in this universe, literally no one can die, or you can die, but it doesn't mean anything. It just means your hell spirit thing comes back. It can escape hell and just be part of the tournament. So it doesn't matter if anybody dies.
But then somebody gets to be reborn as the fire god. So.
Yes.
Rod, closing thoughts?
No, it was pretty much it was all right episode. Didn't hate it. Didn't love it. Probably forget about it.
Again, the title, I was just like, yeah, we're getting apocalypse. We're not getting an apocalypse. No. Thank you guys for joining us. If you have any thoughts, be sure to drop them into the comments of either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram or the TikTok if you don't want Rod to respond to them.
Not for a couple weeks.
If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. We're on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, CastBox. Sure.
Do you want me to tell you the spoilers?
No.